This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for Blaine for the first time. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We do have to remind people that we are on Newsly, which is an iOS that takes podcasts and converts them to audio. We are a featured podcast on Newsly. So if you use coupon code GHOST, you can get 1 month free premium subscription so you can stop scrolling and start listening. So thank you. And we'll get right into you are a retired physician and you've become an author of medical and political thrillers. And you've got three books, right? Like The Undue Influence, Code Blue, the other end of the Stethoscope, and then Beyond the Pillars of Salt, which is like the one that came out in September, right?
Right. So the other
So
two were
did you
published
want to?
earlier. No, I just wanted to say I republished the other two so that now they're all three self-published. And so they all kind of look like they came out just in the last 3 months.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So now you've gone independent like musicians do.
Yeah, and it's much cooler.
So just starting from that, like, is there a reason why you went independent? You felt you more freedom or more control over your own content?
Definitely more freedom and more control and more transparency. So I can see my sales almost as they happen. I changed my covers up to make them way cooler covers.
Mm-hmm.
And I get 5 times the royalty, 4 to 5 times the royalties now that I'm independent.
Yeah, that's the same reason why musicians and producers we go that way too, because a lot of times I actually talked to an author a couple months back, and they were saying that like they have and their publisher just totally blew by it and just decided to go with something, and they didn't seem to have any control over it, and that would kind of really irk them because it's like you want it to look a certain way, and the cover of a book I think is very important, like an album cover.
Absolutely.
Um, so did you run into that kind of issue
So, in the beginning, I didn't know
previously?
any better. And I learned a lot from the publisher that I used for the first 2 books. But I feel like, they didn't necessarily with covers, it's probably like this with music too. You want to be genre specific. You want someone to be able to look at your book. So for example, this is Code Blue, and you can look at that and say, oh yeah, that I can see that's a medical thriller, and the
Mm-hmm.
previous, the
Yeah.
previous one or the previous one for Undue Influences, now this looks like a political thriller. But people told me that the previous cover looked like it was a psychology self-help book. And when I looked at it, I
Oh,
said, "Yeah, I guess it kind of does a little bit." So there was that. I had control over that, and then in addition to that, because if I upload my manuscript and my cover by myself independently, the only thing I pay for is so Amazon, for example, takes 40% of your print books right off the top, no matter what, no matter how many stops it
yeah.
takes to get to Amazon. Amazon takes 40%. So if I'm going through a publisher, the publisher takes their cut. Then if they went through Ingram Spark takes their cut. Then Amazon takes their cut. Then there's the cost of printing the book. And then whatever's left is the royalty, which I have some arrangement to split in some manner with the publisher. But this way, I upload straight to Amazon. Amazon takes its 40%, subtract the cost of printing the book, and the rest is mine. And so it makes a
Yeah,
huge difference.
that's a better split.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of times when sometimes you get a really bad deal if you go with like their production services, and you wrote the song and they're getting like 80 and you're getting 20,
Right.
and you're like,
Right.
what's that? Like, so a lot of times you go independent and it flips where you're getting 80 and they're getting 20. Sometimes in
Exactly.
music that
Exactly.
flip like that. It's just kind of it's all art, and people try to control your art. So did they actually try to control your content, like the publishers? Did they like have a review board or something and actually want you to change things, or did you not run into that kind of thing?
So it depends what kind of publisher you use. If you use a traditional publisher, yeah, they can tell you this chapter's got to go. or I want you to write another chapter that does this. They can tell you what your title is going to be. They can tell you what your cover is going to be. I have a colleague who, she's with one of the big 5 publishers, and she's been writing their books about doctors, women doctors, and she wanted to put a male character in there as a main character, and they said, no, you can't do that. You write women character stories. Like, what? No, we're not going to
wow.
publish with you, you know.
It
So
totally, yeah,
and you know, and
that's
I
hard.
found that with my hybrid publisher to a certain degree. No, you can't do this, you can't do that. And you know, but I had more control because with a hybrid, you're paying them, so you have a little more control.
Yeah,
But it was still, you know,
a more say.
it could be a little bit of friction there. But now, you know, now that I'm doing it myself, you know, I get my own editors and I got my own cover designer, and I make all those decisions for myself, you know. So I don't have to worry
I
about
think
that
that's really
anymore.
good because like a lot of times what I've been running into, like a lot of I've been primarily focused on female singer songwriters for most of my career as a podcaster, and they were running into a lot of issues when I talked to them with the same kind of thing from the music industry. They would
Hmm.
try to create images and say you got to stay in this image, right?
Right.
Craft. And for musicians, like you present yourself, and sometimes that's not you, and they tell you, well, that's what's hype, that's what's going to work, and they basically try to reimagine you. And a lot of lately, a lot of independent songwriters will say, I don't want anything to do with that. I want to be me, right? I want to be an
That's
authentic
right.
version of myself. I don't want to channel whoever's in the top 20. And so I can get that. I can in different types of art in writing, they probably want to channel what works, what sells, what they think sells, and then
What
a
they
lot
think
of them
so, you
are
know,
men.
and
Do
they're
you
not
find that
always
the
correct.
men? Yeah.
You know, they're not always correct. I mean, they're doing their best. I mean, I'm learning, you know, that you want, it's a really delicate balance to be able to write, or whether it's music or whether it's books, you want to write a little bit to market because you want it to sell. If people don't buy it, you don't get your message across.
Mhm.
But you want to still have that balance where you can say what you want to say. And
Yeah.
so, you know, the publishers don't really have a handle on that as well as they'd like to think that they do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's been a problem because a lot of times, like in the industry, that there's a lot of people just want to clone. Because what I've seen in
Right.
all types of art is like, okay, this was what works, so you need to stay in this box,
Hmm.
and you need to sell yourself like this.
Right.
And then if you happen to be a more experimental artist, and let's say you want to channel somebody like a Lou Reed, like, well, well, that's not working. That was like 74. It's not 74. So they're like if we're not, you got to change, you got to channel with what's today. That's not today. And it's like, well, there's a niche, the market's so big. Like the idea that you can't do something is not understanding that this is like the world wide web and you can reach all types of
That's
markets.
right. That's
And
right.
so have you found that your work is more worldwide, or is it more regional? Is it US specific, or does it resonate across the globe?
So I really only have the numbers for this past fall because that's when I self-published everything. So when
Hmm.
you going through a publisher, I don't get results for like 6 months, and
Wow.
they don't
Yeah.
give me a breakdown. So now I'm starting to get data. And I've seen that, you know, my books have been bought in Canada and Australia, which I never knew before. But I don't, you know,
Hmm.
and certainly and mostly probably in the US, but you know, I'm just starting to be able to gather that data and see where, you know, my books are distributed worldwide, but who's buying them is something that I'm just starting to be able to figure out. One of the things that I'm doing now, because I'm also a
So
coach,
that.
is, is I'm
Hmm.
coaching
Life
writers.
coach.
So I'm certified as a
Hmm.
life coach, but I'm doing it also right now as for writers. So not only to coach them in their writing, but to also when they want to publish, to coach them through the process of self-publishing, so that they can upload their own
Oh,
books and they can get 100% of their profits. And I won't, you know, I'm not a publisher. I don't have my fingers in in their pot. I don't have any part of their royalties. But I can format their books for them. So, they pay me for just a small amount of time for me to work with them. And then everything belongs to them so that they don't have to owe any other person any money for what they're making on their art. So that's kind of fun.
So, like, I guess in publishing, like a lot of times for music, people would get like an advance, and it was that how it works. Well, I mean, music, and an artist can get signed to a big label, and they might give them like an advance, and then they have to make that money back. And until they make that money back, they won't make any more money.
That's how it works in the traditional world, exactly. And they almost never get their money back. They almost never get to that point where they're actually starting to make money. So whatever the advance was for most people, for most writers, that's what they're going to get. With a hybrid, it's very similar, except that the writer pays the hybrid, but has a lot more control over what's going on, and is supposed to get 50% of the royalties. But like I said, it goes from the publisher to Ingram to Amazon, and then subtract the price of the book, and then whatever's left over you can split in half, and it doesn't turn out to be very much. So the only way I feel like, unless you're Dan Brown, to make money on your books is to publish it yourself. And a lot of writers are doing that.
That's kind of what's happened. It's happened in the music industry too, because unless you're super big, there's no reason to be on a big label. Because you just maintain more of the control. You maintain your masters, which is like owning the actual material, and that's like if you want it to be reused or as samples and stuff, if you own the master, you get paid. If you let your label own the master, then they get paid.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering, like, that's the type of things, like, you want I guess as a writer, you want your like video screenplay rights or teleplay rights or movie rights. If you did it yourself, you control that. But if your publisher kind of sneaked something in there and you didn't see it, they might have the teleplay rights and all that type of rights. If it ever gets turned to a TV show or movie, then you find out, I actually lost that.
Yeah, it's something that unfortunately a lot of people are very remiss about reading their contracts, and they miss that kind of stuff. But in my first two books, the first time I published them, there was a whole paragraph that said that the movie rights go to the publisher. And I just said, no, I'm not doing that. I said, okay. And they just put lines through it. It was like,
you got to catch that. You got to catch it when they're doing it.
If you don't ask, it doesn't happen. And so many people are just like, oh, you're going to publish my book. Oh, okay, I'll just take whatever you can give me. And they're afraid they'll lose the whole deal. So they don't, you can ask nicely for things like that. And you can say, I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me, But, if you self-publish it. And then the other thing to do that I think is really important, and I think this goes for artists as well, is that once it's yours, you should go to the Library of Congress, to the government copyright office, and register your work. And it costs $65 for books. I don't know, it's probably not that different for music. And you send them a copy. And you get a certificate, and nobody can steal it then. If there's ever like an issue, if there's ever, you have rights and nobody can come along and say, well, you didn't say it was yours exclusively. So it's something that I recommend to my clients too, is to just take the 15 minutes and register.
Yeah, I register through my publishing pro organization, like through BMI and ASCAP, like, and then they actually have a whole system that does that with like a number. You get like an ISBN number, like musicians, we get this number, like an IME, we get this number. And then if when people try to play something on YouTube, they get copyright claims. Like if they pick up any kind of phrase or any section of your song, it will suddenly say, hey, well, you got a claim, and they got to pay you. And so you can see, like, digitally, when you self-publish nowadays, you can go on dashboards and you can see the claims you have, that people were using your stuff and they actually got to pay you. And that's kind of cool. Like when you get control, then you suddenly see these dashboards, like, oh, I'm selling in Israel and Argentina, and people in Berlin are listening. I just think that's really cool when artists are able to really see the impact of their work.
Yeah, and I mean the world is just not that big anymore. Everyone's so well connected. There's no reason for us to not be able to share with people all over the world, and know that we're doing it.
So in your So in your business to do when you're doing your mentoring or your that type of
Yeah,
work,
it's kind of
do
like
you go
mentoring,
on like
coaching, mentoring.
tours coaching? Do you do like conferences or would you go travel? Like if you start seeing your metrics and you see Australia is actually a really big market, would you think of to actually go to some kind of conference in Australia and actually speak there?
I would if I were invited there. I sort of, I'm embarrassed to say this, but I still a little bit at the effect of the whole pandemic, and I haven't
Oh, do you?
traveled very much
Mhm.
since. My son's on his way to Argentina in a couple of days. Speaking of Argentina, he's going to be there for 3 weeks. He and his wife just go, but he's young, and
Mhm.
I haven't, I mean, ideally, yes, I would do that. I would have to have my airfare paid for it, obviously, but I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
love to do something like that. And
Yeah,
I
because
would
the
love to
world.
just show authors what they don't need to, what they can do for themselves, so that they don't feel like this is the only way I can get my book published.
So I understand the pandemic. I mean, I do this online thing here. Like I don't do a podcast where people
Mm,
have podcasts where they go to a TV studio and they have somebody come in and they do it that way. I have not done that. I've actually looked into it, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that yet either. So I'm
mhm,
still totally online. But I have like thought of, potentially going across, like if I interview a musician and they're from Tokyo, actually do it in Tokyo, or do it in
yeah, that would be
London or do
cool.
it in Berlin. That would be kind of cool. But have you been doing like online type of author, I guess influencer type of conferences? Like, are there webinars that you've been part of?
Yeah, so I've just started doing webinars. I just did one about less than a month ago, and I have two more scheduled coming up. I have one scheduled in February. I have one scheduled in April. It's actually March 1st, and in April. And what I want to start doing is I'm sort of new to this whole technology world, um,
Hmm.
but I do want to start doing YouTubes, and
Yeah,
to give like a to basically explain things, because nobody, writers don't really need me for this. I mean, I'd like to just put the information out there, but if they want someone to kind of hold their hand a little bit and show them how to do it, then they can contact me, and I'd be happy to help them out that way as well.
yeah. So then you have that kind of situation where you can actually offer a service. You can offer a program where that's where it seems like influencers and people who are into this kind of modern technology. I've even seen people try to like use reels to kind of
Hmm.
bring people in or use like YouTube shorts because everybody's attention span, that's been like the big problem. Like, yeah, I'm a musician from like I'm a 70s, and I'm used to writing songs that are 5 minutes long. And every time I talk to an A&R person, say you got to bring that down to two minutes and 30 seconds. And I'm like,
I know.
really? I don't want to bring it down that far. But
I
have you
know.
found that problem with like books? Do they tell you there's like a page limit?
There was not really. Actually, I think with books, a lot of readers prefer a longer book, because
Oh,
once
that's
they get
cool.
into the book, they don't want it to be over so fast. I don't think people expect to read a book and be done in 15 minutes. They expect it. If they like it, they want to stay with it for a while.
That's
So, but
cool.
I know what you mean. I'm just starting to learn about the whole social media thing. I just finished this, it's kind of a course with this awesome guy who is teaching us about how to get, you only have about 3.5 seconds to grab someone's attention, while there maybe less as they're scrolling, and
Hmm.
what are the things to say, how to call people out so that they'll stop scrolling. And so I learned a lot from him. He's a great guy. His name was Jerry Potter, and I recommend him. He didn't ask me; he doesn't even know I mentioned his name. But like he's
Yeah.
just a really good guy, and he offers this program, and he's very interactive with everyone. And so I'm trying to learn about that. I'm sort of getting over my, like, I don't feel awkward having a conversation with you, but I feel
Hmm.
awkward doing a video of just myself talking to the air. I haven't
Oh,
quite,
oh yeah.
like
And
doing a
yeah,
reel or doing a YouTube. It's like, but there's nobody there. I'm talking to the computer. So I'm trying to get over that, because I
during
feel like
the
that's the way that I'm going to really start to make my business work, not just the publishing, but I really want to, I'm still working very part-time in medicine, and I want to quit because it's just,
Mm-hmm.
it's not what I signed up for. It's
Yeah.
just changed. It's gone through so many changes, and it's really what inspired me to start writing, actually. But yeah,
That's
so
interesting. Maybe we can focus on that because you had been in medicine, and then what changed that made you want to get out of it? Maybe like at a
so
high level kind of.
it used to be that your doctor, we could have a an encounter, in the office, and I could get to know who you were a little bit. I could, understand your issues, where you're coming from, where your obstacles were, your challenges, and I could help you with whatever your problem was, and that's really satisfying. But now we have the people who own medical practices are not doctors anymore. They're corporate moguls. They're looking at the bottom line. It's treated like a business for profit. So it's really about how many patients per hour can be seen, how many procedures can be ordered, how happy the patient is. The patient, I don't know if you ever go to your doctor's office and then afterwards you come out and you get a text message or an email. Would you rate your experience? It's like if you went to Best Buy and you have to fill out a survey, and so all of a sudden, we're selling Apple TVs instead of, trying to make people better. Sometimes as doctors, we have to say something to you that you don't want to hear. Like, I can't fix your lung problem if you continue to smoke. Maybe that's not what you want to hear. So, or maybe they didn't like the coffee creamer selection in the waiting room. And so, and we get downgraded for those things. It's just become about making money and not about taking care of people anymore. And it's one of the reasons I became a coach, because coaches do what doctors used to do. I can spend time with people and work with them and help them to, overcome whatever their challenges are. But when it became really unbearable, this was actually before the pandemic, and I wrote my first book. This was my first book, and it follows a doctor through her day and all the different encounters and the issues that come up, the difficulties in keeping everybody happy. And I live in a part of the country where there's a large percentage of entitled, rather demanding patients who kind of expect what they want, when they want it. And, if there's a cardiac patient in the room, but they think that their throat should be swabbed first because that patient didn't belong here, they should have gone to the emergency room. It's just very frustrating. So I started writing these little encounters, and they were all based on real patient encounters, but of course I changed everything so you couldn't recognize it. But then I realized I couldn't publish it as a nonfiction because I could get sued, I could get fired, I could get, like it was complicated. So I had to make it a fiction. So I made it a medical thriller. And then when you write a thriller, you need to have a plot, you need to have a hero, and you need to have a villain, and you need to have, all those things that go into writing a book. And so I wrote this story about the Russian oligarchs who hack into our electronic medical records, and they take that information and they extort millions of dollars and then murder the patients. So people wanted to know where that happened.
I think that's a cool way to seg into that. You had your real, but you have real life experience that makes it feel real, because you have the personal experience of actually having those real situations happen. But then you kind of turned it with a fictional liberty to add the drama to it, to add the suspense, and to actually give yourself a protagonist and an enemy, that kind of dynamic. That's cool. I think that's what the essence of being like a creative person is, that you can take something and then turn it into something that it maybe wasn't that, and you actually built something new. That's the essence. I think why I like to talk to creative people.
Well, thank you. So that was and after that I realized that I really loved writing thrillers, and I loved it so much more than practicing medicine. And so I've been making a short but steady exit from medicine. I'm not quite able to get Medicare yet, so I'm still working a little bit so I can get health insurance. But then when I wrote my second book, it was a political thriller, and that book also was because I was looking around at the way that people don't listen to each other. They argue over everything. And it was no longer acceptable for you and I to have a different point of view. We'd have to hate each other and stop speaking to each other, even if we're in the same family. And so I came up with this story that the government was literally brainwashing the population, and just to make it, so really absurd as to be like, hoping people would kind of read that and say, oh, but you know what, we've kind of turned into that. Like, maybe we should do. The whole point was to ask people to stop and think about their own opinions instead of just parroting whatever, their friends or their party or whatever. But I had a really good time with that book, and it kind of bordered a little bit into the paranormal, but I try to base everything, with a really solid science foundation, so that you don't have to make a huge leap to say, well, that could happen or that couldn't happen, just to make it sort of plausible. And
right. I think today with COVID, like things have become like the idea that what had just happened, it was kind of science fiction in a lot of people's heads. And it's like, oh wow, it actually happened. so
that's right.
it was like I'm sitting there like, and I'm a big science, I'm in a Twilight Zone, kind of, watching, Star Trek a kid. I'm a child of the 70s.
Me too.
And I was like, yeah. We're like, wow. There's all these stories about these pandemics and, things in the future. You read all this dystopian things that happen because some kind of tragic thing. And then we actually have the thing happen in our lifetime. We're like, wow. He's like, wow. He's like, if 9/11 wasn't enough, now we got this.
Exactly.
Like,
and then my third book kind of came from that. So this is the third book, Beyond the Pillars of Salt. And what it did was it picked up where Undue Influences left off about 10 years later. And it looks at one of the possible progressions of our society if we continue along a route of like not thinking for ourselves and letting other people determine basically our destiny. And so it takes place on planet Earth, but planet Earth is completely reclaiming itself, breaking up. There's a lot of tectonic activity. There's volcanoes in places we didn't have them. The fire, the wildfire situation out in California, there's no California anymore. And then also in the government, it's turned into a dictatorship because at that time I started writing it, there were no more free or fair elections. I mean, thank God our system kind of held for now anyway, but what happens in the future. So it's a dictatorship on a planet that's not self-sustaining. And so there's the same group of people that we met in the second book, and they're trying to figure out how to survive and where to go. And
so your characters from one book continue into the next book.
Yeah, so they, when I was writing Undue Influences, I couldn't finish it, and until I realized that I was never going to be able to solve the problems of the world in this one book. It's like when you write a book, you want to close it up at the end and feel like it was satisfying. Like you don't want to leave the reader feeling like, well, so now what, So so I realized I couldn't finish it. I kind of brought it to a close and continued it, and now I'm writing a science fiction series on the planet that this group of people escaped to. And so that's kind of fun.
Cool. So it's kind of like a trilogy now. They're all connected.
Yeah.
That's cool because I'm a big fan of Tolkien and the idea that you can have these books tied together. I always thought that was cool, as a kid, getting into books that actually were linked. When I found books that were like that, I always thought that was really, oh, that's awesome. Because that's just something I thought. And it doesn't happen all the time. You don't always get somebody that actually does that. I mean, science fiction, you do get that more often. And in some series of like detective novels, you might get that same detective keeps on doing murder mysteries and going through it, and you can read that. But I think it's so. When you were younger, were you like wanted to be a doctor and you were creative? And you decided to be a doctor, but and kind of like not do the creative thing? Because some people like they go to art school and they say, "Well, I'm being an artist. I'm just gonna go be a starving artist." But you have those tendencies early to want to be an artist.
I was a liberal arts major. I was a liberal arts major. I majored in a combination of philosophy and Hebrew, And then I started graduate school, a doctoral program in comparative religion. And but my family of origin was not on board with that whole thing, and they'd been telling me since I was 9 years old that I was going to be a doctor. And so eventually, I kind of caved in and said, "Okay, I guess I'll be a doctor." And I've enjoyed medicine, you know. I certainly in the early years, but I think that part of me was always there. And I read mostly science fiction when I was a teenager. And you know, that was my, and I was a Trekkie, you know, from
Yeah, maybe Harlan Ellison, Ben Bova, and Ray Bradbury, you know, Isaac Asimov, all that
yep,
stuff. Yeah, I was like totally. I was like, in that kid is like, yeah, I like Leonard Nimoy is my favorite like hero.
right.
That's my hero. Yeah, because I was to that. I was, I don't know. I was like, I was so into Star Trek. When it went off the air, I was like, what happened? What
Yeah,
happened?
right. I know. And then
It
I
was
was
like
such a purist. Like
I was
the
just so
next
into it.
the next generation was like, yeah, but it's not the original, you know.
It's not. Yeah, it's not Bone. That thing going on between Bones and it's like, oh, you green blooded. You know, they were kind of like being able to make statements about racism, but in science fiction,
Right.
Sterling would do. The monsters on Maple Street. You can make statements in science fiction, and you could put it on TV, and maybe it's controversial, but oh, that's like sci-fi, so you could sneak things in. You can make
You could
political
sneak it
statements
in.
within science fiction, which I think I always thought that was cool. That you could see it, like if you understood what was going on, it's like, hey, this writer's actually making a statement about what's happening today, but he's putting in this future state.
Right.
Maybe you don't see that. They kind of get away with
Right.
it without
Well, you
having.
know, and back
That's
then
something that you, yeah.
there wasn't as much sensitivity, I think. And the sensitivity is a two-edged sword. I mean, it's like on the one hand, it's good that we're more conscious of the ways that we might hurt people and trying not to do that. And on the other hand, sometimes I think we take it to the point of absurdity. And so you can't say anything without, you know, oh my God, you know. So it's like it's one of those balancing acts. But we didn't have those issues the same way, you know, however many
Yeah.
decades ago that was.
Yeah, that's the thing about like all the art today. Like the people can be. It's really interesting because the people can be really outrageous in music. We can and say things that we never were allowed to say. But then if you say something that's more political, then that's a different thing, right? You could be outrageous
Right.
with kind of like really kind of like bedroom type of stuff or sensuality. But if you go and try to say something about the state of the world in a political way, you can get really pushed down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're like, it's like, well, you can have freedom to do this, but you don't have freedom to do that.
Right. Yeah. It's like we say, wait, what's the matter? You can't take a joke.
Whatever.
No, they can't take a joke.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's hard because like one of the things that you were talking about, like one of your topics is like like this. I guess it's like who does it serve to discourage people from evaluating information for themselves and political platforms, to groceries. Is just like people aren't thinking, right? Like you go to a liberal arts school. I went to Bowdoin, and it was about like critical thinking and holistic thought from like the Socratic method. Thinking
Hmm.
like that way.
Right.
If you go
Right.
to a
Right.
school like that, that's the way
Hmm.
you're taught to like challenge things. Somebody said something and said, well, why? Like, can you prove it?
Exactly.
Can you show me like your evidence, right? People today don't, I don't like a big broad brush, but seeing people, somebody said something like on a talk radio or on a podcast, and they just believe it without
Right.
checking it out, without looking, without doing any research. It's like, okay, it's like, don't you think you should?
Don't you think it's just I remember
This
seeing this
seems,
post a few years ago. It was somewhere, or maybe on Facebook. So it was an internet post, and it said, so it had like a quote and then the name of the person, and it says, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet," and then it says Abraham Lincoln.
yeah, that's a fun. To show
It
prove the
was
point.
perfect. It was like, yeah, of course, you know.
Prove the point. Yeah, because you can do anything like on the net, with computers and stuff. You can shape anything the way you want. You can make somebody look like they're saying X, and they did say it, but you take it out of context and you shape it. You can shape things to whatever you want with the tech, and so you've got to have critical thinking they're like, okay, what do you believe? Like, you, without somebody telling you what to believe, like, what are your core beliefs, right? And
And my
then
point with that statement about who does it benefit is that, if we don't unpack those things and look at them, what we don't realize is that we're being manipulated. Why are we being manipulated? Some other entity has an agenda that involves us but does not concern us. Like, it doesn't have our interests in mind. It involves us because it wants us to spend money usually, or give them power. It's usually about money or power. And so if we don't recognize those things, then we're just being led around. And that's, if you want to be led around, that's fine, but you should, maybe it's your girlfriend or your boyfriend that's saying, come this way, I'm going to bring you into the kitchen and give you, to show you what I made. But it might not be so innocent. Usually it's not that innocent. And one of the things that they're playing with is the fact that we're so inundated by all of this information that's coming at us so quickly that it's very difficult to stop and unpack each thing that we see. And they're counting on that. The proverbial the people who want to manipulate us are counting on the fact that it's just too exhausting to analyze everything that comes at us. And so when they show us a commercial, or they show us something on Facebook, I mean, half the time what we see, what Google shows you, is only those things that it already has figured out you want to hear. It doesn't show you the other side. You only get
I mean, I was looking
what
at
you
what
already believe.
it's only showing. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. It just reinforces your behavior. So if you go like alt right or alt left or the middle, like if you're in the middle, you're only going to see the middle. If you're on the right, you're going to only see the right. If you're on the left, you're only going to see the left. So you don't get any opportunity to then cross pollination. You're going to
Right.
the extremes, which, like, if you're learning like holistic thinking, it's like not to just think about the extremes, but to look at everything. Like, you would read Stalin, right? You might read Hitler, not that
Mm-hmm.
you believe in it, but you would read it so you understand the
Mm-hmm.
poles, right?
Right.
That you understand the poles of extreme political behavior, so you can make judgments about not making mistakes going forward.
Right. I mean, and like you talk about Stalin, and I'm thinking about Marx, and all of that, all of those forms of government in their ideal state work, and it's nice to be able to think about that. So the early Marx,
Yeah.
from each according to his means to each according to his need. I mean, how wonderful is that? The problem is it breaks down because people are inherently lazy and they're inherently greedy, and that's just part of the human condition. And so the people who can give more are not necessarily willing to give more at a certain point, and the people that need may decide they need more than they really need. So it doesn't work, but in the ideal state, it does work. And it's nice to be able to see that and not condemn the whole
I mean, well,
suit.
if you think about the way the world's going, with the resources becoming less and less available, and people getting forced into like less water, less air, less good food, that communal concepts inherently will be the only concepts that might actually be workable, right? Because
Right.
individualism, if your resources are gone and you don't have enough, then either you're going to get into a fight where they just say whoever has the bigger stick's going to take everything,
Right.
and so you end up having like all kinds of bad behavior. And I remember when I was at Bowdoin, we were talking about global warming back in '86. I had a professor that was predicting like there could be resource wars because of water, because of food,
Mm-hmm.
and the global warming would cause like nationalism, that he had gone through and created a thesis that determined that that type of behavior might inherently cause people to become more radical and more nationalistic when the world was going the other way, or like a UN type of idea, or an idea there's a globalization. Now people are kind of retreating and trying to gain power and trying to gain things. And he was actually had a thesis where he pointed out how that could happen. I was a political science major, and I was like, wow. Like a lot of things my professor, I would tell my wife, my professor told me in '86 is actually happening, because he was
Yeah.
a thinker. He was. But there's some people today. I'm like, are people thinking? It's like you have a brain. Don't just get
Yeah.
overwhelmed with inputs. Yeah, I think the problem is we're getting overwhelmed with all the inputs, and we're not taken the time to like turn it off and process it.
And they're also, they're teasing us with temptations. They want us, the things that we get hit with are things that promote convenience, for one thing, which is like the problem with the doctor's offices. Fashion's got to be the best fashion, and the excess of, whatever, like those have become the things that everybody goes for. And it's not, those aren't really, those aren't noble things to strive for. I feel like one of the most debilitating diseases that we're dealing with is not the pandemic, and it's not opiate epidemic, but it's the addiction to more. We just, people just want more. They don't even necessarily know why they want more. They just want more. And it becomes this hunger.
It's crazy
for no
because
other reason.
Cars, like the prices of cars, if you think about like the car, people are going and investing $100,000 into a car. And I'm like, really? Like, why do you think that that's the right thing to do? And they're being forced into it because of kind of peer pressure to look good, look better, kind of show that you're successful. And not that, like, wouldn't that be better to put into your own education, right? Wouldn't that be better to actually put into your own health? Buy something to work out, to go and take courses or think or help somebody, donate to something. And it's just about, I got to show off. So the show off thing is just so much. Even in music, I get kind of really discouraged because like I grew up with Dylan and Neil Young, Buffalo Springfield,
I love
saying
Neil
the things
Young.
they said. Yeah, and then people just saying like, look at the car I got, look at all the gold I got. Like, what is that? Why is that?
I think that something gets messed up in our heads. So there's certain basic needs, right, that we have. We have the need for security. We have the need for love. We have a need for shelter, for warmth and clothing. We also have a need for community and connection. And somewhere along the line, that I feel like gets confused with the need for conformity. So community doesn't have to mean conformity. You don't have to be just like everyone else to be able to be connected with everyone else. But it just gets like the wires get crossed, and it's like, people won't accept me if I don't look like them, dress like them, eat like them, drive a car like them. And, it also comes back to, people aren't thinking for themselves. You see, you're saying, why don't people stop and think about this? It's effort. It takes effort. It takes work to think these things through. And most people, especially now when everything happens so fast, it takes time to think things through. And for most individuals, that's not a luxury that they're willing to invest in. They want what they want now, not even in 10 minutes. It's sad.
Well, I am envious of the reader audience compared to the music audience, because at least the reader audience still actually will stay with you for your book and to actually read the content. The problem, I think, a lot of times today, people are so distracted. As a producer and a musician, we can't get people to listen to a whole record. We have to put out singles, and we can't get people to stay with us for like a full. And to me, like an album is kind of like a short story. It's actually representing the full picture of an artist, and the deeper tracks are like the deeper parts of a book, right? Like the single is the obvious thing. It's like the cliff note of an artist, but the deeper tracks represent the core of who that artist really is. And if you never really listen to anything other than the single, you don't get the full picture of who that artist is. At least with a writer, if you read the book, you're going to get the full picture of that author.
But even with writing, it's you have to grab someone in the first few pages. Sometimes the first paragraph. If you want them to read the book, it has to be. You have to make them care about the character immediately. You have to, they teach you. You don't start by. You have to give a certain amount of the background. Like explain. What's going on in the world that you've been transported into, but you have to find some reason to care. within the first couple of paragraphs, or people won't read the book. And so when you go to Amazon, you can, almost always you click on a book, you can look inside, and it'll let you read, the first 15 pages or so. And if it doesn't grab you in the first, you may not get through the 15 pages, it doesn't grab you in the first page and a half, or sometimes the first paragraph, that's it. So yeah, it's still that same, to get people willing to invest their time.
So do you have a technique that you've learned to try to capture that reader? Is there a certain thing that, like, I guess sometimes it's like you front load the story at the beginning and then kind of back into it through like use of time periods? Like a lot of times, like if you watch TV, like they'll have like, you go to push the beginning, the end of the story to the beginning. You have a foreshadow, you show something, you show some critical thing that's like exciting, and then you back into it, further into it, then you start going deeper. Is that like
so? Yeah. So, and I think I've gotten better at that with each successive book. But yeah, so in the beginning of the book, I try to start with something compelling, something there's got to be action. So in the first chapter of the book, there's got to be a lot of action that draws the reader in, and like, what is this? And then at the same time, something that makes the reader care about the character that's being acted upon or doing the acting. And then after that, and then you sort of make a promise to the reader that we're coming back to that. Like they don't, like, then you can switch topics in the second chapter a little bit and start filling in other things, because the reader wants, they want to come back and find out about what happened in that first chapter, and you have to give it to them, of course. So, I mean, you intend to do that. So
you kind of bring them in, and then you hook them, and
it's about suspense. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of unravel the onion, it's like you get into the layers, and it's like, yeah, I got to give you some background so you can understand, but I'm not going to give you all of it. So you keep on reading because I'm leaving pieces out. So you keep on leaving pieces out. So they got to dive in. It's like, oh, there's something going on here, but I don't know exactly what it is. And you're not going to find out unless you keep on reading.
Right. Exactly.
That's the kind of gotcha. Yeah. As a musician, you're trying to get somebody that hook that, we got a riff, or we got a melody, or we got a chorus that's going to be compelling to make you want to keep on listening. It's kind of like you got to front load that at the very couple 15 seconds, 5 seconds. You got to get them to hear that. And it's like in the past, you used to be able to write a song where you could build. You could build, and you might not get to that. Right. So like that's the difference. Like if you're an old school like writer, you're like, well, I want to build it. I don't want to front load it. I want them to get to it by like the third minute. That's when it starts really kicking in. And people aren't willing to listen past 2.3 minutes.
I know. It's, and you know what? It's sad because the people who don't put in the time for those things, they miss out. They don't know they're missing out, but they do. There's a whole dimension of experience that they're not getting.
Yeah, I think it's just people are so distracted. What I've been is like, take the favorite creative person you're into, right? And take the time to like read a book, like to take the time to read the paper, right? Not just go on the net, go get a paper and actually read it. Go read like a Time magazine, go read like a Rolling Stone, and actually don't have your phone on while you're reading it. Like actually read the article and like, talk to your friends about it, have a discussion about it. And then you can start to process things and think about things, and then you actually read something, you can have a real conversation, because you can say, hey, what do you think about what this writer was talking about here? And that was something as a kid, when we didn't have so many things distracting us, and we just had regular TV and no cable, I don't read a book or listen to the whole record, or actually go to the library.
Yeah, I mean, that was
so much fun. Go to the library, but
that's like when I was in medical school. One of the things that was really funny. My friends were laughing at me, but so I was a philosophy major, and here I am in medical school, and we were taking immunology, and we're learning about how the immune system works, and the white cells, and and I'm looking at this, and it's like the immune system basically determines what belongs in the body and what doesn't belong in the body. And the things that don't belong there, it goes after to get rid of, right? And I'm sitting there, I had a buddy that we used to study together, and he had been an English teacher before he came to medical school. And I said, I was like, this is like self-consciousness on the cellular level. This is so cool. This is the body knowing what's me and what isn't me. And this is like, and he was like, okay, we need to get through another 2 inches of notes here. But it was like, there was so much that I would have loved to have just, like, wow, just thinking about that on, on every level, on an energy level and on a psychological level and a physiological level, it all parallels. And I just found that stuff so fascinating and fun. But there was no time in medical school because I needed to memorize the complement pathway.
I think now with your, being a novelist, that you're taking those concepts that you had, right, where you could see the art, the artistic point of view, or or a different, like, not just the science point of view, but the philosophical point of view. Like, if you think even a religious kind of point of view, you look at that the way it's, wow, like karma, like that. It's like, so you could find all kinds of relatable things from a scientific fact and then use it in art. And a lot of, if you think about bands like Genesis, they used to take science fiction. Peter Gabriel was famous for taking all kinds of science fiction books and actually putting them into like rock operas. And I was always really into how he would take like Harlan Ellison and take these science fiction books and turn them into these like rock opera 7-minute songs. And I guess kids today might not realize he was doing that before he got big. But like in Genesis, when he was the lead, that's what he used to do. And I think it would be cool if kids would actually go back and look at how Peter Gabriel got to be who he is. Because if you see the early work, it's really complex and it's actually coming from a really cool place. But that's why I think it's just
it's so much fun to look at things and try to look at it in a different way, or look at it, just to apply other things that to that same concept. So in Beyond the Pillars of Salt, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but they do manage to get off world. And I put a lot of research into this book. And what's really interesting is that we actually have, as a species, as humanity, we have all the equations to be able to accomplish faster than light speed travel. Like, we know how to do it. We don't have the energy requirements fulfilled. We don't know how to generate enough energy to make that happen. But if that wasn't a problem, we already know how to do it. And then another physicist came along, and he solved some of that problem. So I went into all of this, and so they actually do manage. And like I said, I try to make it so that you don't have to make that much of a leap. It's like, okay, so there's ways to get around it. Like, so gamma radiation is like so powerful, but you can't contain it because it's got such a short wavelength that it cuts through everything. So I created a new harder substance that would contain the gamma radiation. So, one of the things I did was I do accomplish light speed. So when you look at Star Trek and Star Wars and, all those, like, they love switching to light speed and boom, there they go. But I was like, you know what? I'm not sure it would be like that. Like, so our bodies are now, our minds operate, we experience our minds as energy. We experience our bodies as matter. And all of a sudden, there's going to be a disconnect there because our bodies are now going to be experienced as energy because now we've converted, equals MC squared. And it was like, I changed the whole experience of going to light speed as something that was not just, okay, flip a switch and here we go, but a necessary adaptation of the human psyche to be able to like experience that. And then if we're going to go faster, is it going to happen again? And why it might not happen again, because now the brain knows how to interpret what happened and it's not something so confusing, and that's sort of based on neurologic precedent that, if you experience something you've never seen before, it's very confusing. But once you've seen it once, your brain automatically, okay, I know what that is, so I was really trying to use knowledge to delve
figure
into
out
it and make it not just the, oh yeah, we're switching to light speed now. Like, no, this is like a major, what happens
it
to our
seems like, yeah,
bodies
it always
when it
seems like
goes
to
at the
me
speed of light? Like something
you would
is
have to be.
different.
I always thought you would have to be like you couldn't be just sitting on the deck. You'd have to actually be like in a some kind of capsule or thing to protect your body from the like in a field, some kind of field that would keep you from being affected, so your body and your mind wouldn't go crazy. It's kind of idea is like I don't know if I ever saw this, but when I was a kid, some science fiction comic book or some. The idea was like you were in this capsule and you weren't sitting on the deck like Captain Kirk. You had to actually be in this kind of thing. It was almost like a coffin, and you couldn't get out of it until you were done with the jump.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the idea was like it could affect your body, so you couldn't just be acting like normal.
So I was trying to understand what it might feel like in your mind for this to happen, for this sudden change in the way that you're experiencing the universe. And it was just so much fun to like look at something completely different, something that we think we know. I mean, we know in science fiction, and just say, well, wait a minute, maybe not. It's just like
It may
I
not
love
be.
taking the science and applying it to things that we don't know anything about, but like, hey, we can do this, but it's not going to be that easy. So I had a lot of
Well,
fun with it.
I think that's really cool to take like modern science or where we are today and then turn it into art. That's been like a part of like what we do as artists, like even musicians that are into science fiction, and we put it into like concept albums, and we'll take ideas like we're going to do a future state of the world and kind of think about it, um, like the way Yes or Genesis would. But yeah, I think it's always cool to talk to people who have different points of view, and it's been really awesome talking to you. We're kind of getting to the close of the hour,
This
but
was a lot of fun.
yeah, I love doing podcasting. I got into it because like you get to know people, you get to get uh, all types of people. Initially, I was only doing musicians. Now I opened it up to authors and all kinds of other creative people, and it's just fun. And I want people to encourage people to go to your website, deborablaine.com, and check out everything. And that's where everybody can get everything about you, right? They can get into all the books, find out where they can get them. Is that the best place?
Yeah, so the books are there. There are links, to buy them if you're interested. I have a mission statement, which is kind of touches a little bit on what we started out with. I have a blog, and I have my coaching practice is on a separate page also. So if anybody's interested in getting some help with writing or publishing their books, but yeah, thanks.
So your coaching, they can get into that, and you have like your pricing and how you get in contact with you for that. All that's there.
So I don't have the pricing specifically, but I do have there's a place where they can book a free discovery session, where we can just chat
Oh,
for
cool.
20 minutes
So
or
you do a
so,
free
see
session first.
if I'm somebody that might be able to help them. And because depending on what I'm coaching them on, so for example, if it's writing a book, that's a different kind of protracted process. If they've got their book and they just want it published, that's like a one-time fee, that's just until it gets done, and it's not very expensive. But there's they can just book a session. There's a link to Calendly, and they can just book a session so we can just chat. And that's just and I love to meet authors anyway, so whether they decide to use my services or not, I always have a good time meeting people that way.
That's awesome. I am very happy that we had this chat, and
Me too.
this will be out there on Spotify video podcast, Anchor FM, and Apple by tomorrow. And we're going to send you a landing page that you can use,
Great.
where we'll have all the social media. But thank you. Have a good night. We're in New Hampshire, so it's nighttime here. But
yeah, I'm in New York. It's nighttime here too.
We're both on the East Coast. That's cool. It's a snowstorm here today. But yeah, everybody check out DebraBlaine.com. We always encourage everybody who watches the show to click the links. These links are clickable when it gets on Spotify and Facebook. Like the final publishing, the permanent links will actually have those that will be clickable. So thank you very much again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed talking to you. And good luck with your music.
Oh,